Now, I would like everyone to remain an adult with what is to come next. To avoid demonetization and a strike, we're going to use every single euphemism and alternative speaking term I can think of, which is okay considering that's, how this kind of happened in the USSR anyway. But yes, I mean those kinds of toys. The kind you lock away from younger people, the kind that if you're under 18 and watching this video, please go away. You are not welcome to watch this video. Go and enjoy your youth before you are cursed with existence such as what I'm about to uncover in this clip. Anyway, welcome back to 5 Minute History, the weekly series where patrons choose the topic. This week we'll be discussing Soviet self-care products, courtesy of Daddy. Yeah, they submitted their name as Daddy onto the Patreon list. Yeah, okay. Old Man Reacts, have fun with this one, but sub to him. He's great, by the way. He's funny. He does Warhammer stuff. But anyway, to start with, the world's oldest profession, being a lady or gentle comrade of the night, was not officially a thing in the USSR. Never mind the fact I've quite literally seen the inside of a former Soviet establishment and seen how many special holes were in the walls for cameras. It's beyond hilarious. They're shooting films that would have production qualities of Oppenheimer in there. It's more than hilarious, and I recommend it if you're ever in a former Eastern Bloc country and there's a little museum tour. Go have a look. They're really, really interesting. Anyway, it was considered wrong, it being taboo and adult activities were limited to making more little communists to join the Komsomol. However, I'm sure many of you are aware that, well, a lot of taboos exist when it comes to this stuff, especially in the West. But in the East, particularly in East Germany for example, there weren't as many human body taboos. And for example, in the USSR or Eastern Bloc, famously in Eastern Germany, people love to skinny dip. And anyone who has been to a sauna or banya in modern Russia, let alone the former Soviet Union, knows that, well, the bits do come out. It was a very strange experience for my 18-year-old self as a white boy from Queensland, but I'll leave it at that. But anyway, the USSR existed here in a bit of a limbo. Somewhat more progressive, given, well, there weren't as many individual taboos, but also not as progressive in this sense, because, well, the USSR is a state-run enterprise, and it's being run by a gerontocracy who have different beliefs, and yeah, it's not as progressive if you catch my drift. So that leaves us with personal moments. Now, in the West, you can just go shopping for it. It's pretty normal these days, and it was pretty normal for your parents too in the 60s. Look up the revolution. They had much more fun than we did in our teens and 20s. But would you believe you could technically just go shopping for it in the Soviet Union as well? Kind of. While you have magazines and movies starting to kick off in the West during the Cold War, as well as a growing LGBT movement, I mean, the magazines had been a thing since before World War II, but you get what I'm saying with those kind of magazines. The USSR was hard-pressed in the opposite direction. You didn't really talk about or express this stuff in public or to others. In fact, it was really taboo. Even though, well, we're all made by it, but it was still a no-no. There was no art, no magazines or films or anything. Quite often in Soviet love stories, there would be a fade to black between the wedding and the hospital door, and poof, a baby was magically delivered by the power of Lenin alone. Or something like that, you get the gist. However, that doesn't stop human nature. And the Soviets, well, they got a little creative. Of course, before we go into devices, I am going to take a step to the left and discuss contraception, because yes, it was a thing in the USSR. The simplest form was, well, not doing it, but that doesn't really work because accidents happen. So back then, like today, you could just walk into a pharmacy and buy a special sock for your special member called a galosh or galoshes. These little socks were made in the Bakovskaya factory and treated with talcum powder or baby powder. In many cases, they were terribly made, often thick as all hell and stiff, and this led to them largely being ignored. Instead, quite often citizens actually just bought them and used them for different purposes and used the black market to get Western ones until about the 80s when latex was finally introduced. They were not to be used without a healthy application of Vaseline though, which was conveniently often sold right next to them. IUDs did exist too, but they were extremely poorly made, and in many cases, they just didn't work. To be honest, generally speaking, they were, the galoshes that is, mostly used as water balloons by kids or as water carriers by hikers. Hell, some people use them to carry cigarettes to keep them dry, lighters, and more. Some people actually even use them as socks for their dogs during wet weather. They were, yeah. They were interesting. The most widespread form of contraception in the USSR, though, was simply put abortion, which in many cases was state-sanctioned as the correct decision in that situation. Roughly 6.5 to 11 million abortions occurred in the USSR annually by the late 1980s. And it wasn't uncommon for a woman to have multiple in her lifetime. Now, although you could walk into any store and get yourself as many doggy slippers as you needed, devices, well, they were out of the question. For men, they were a sign that you couldn't, well, get it in real life. And for women, it was seen as somewhat bourgeois, a real worker uses her hands kind of thing. Interestingly, though, there was still a market. Pharmacies would begin to stock massages, devices such as the VP1, that would increase muscle tone. Notice that they took the time and effort to colour it to pink, which in most Soviet products at the time were utilitarian. Yeah, women noticed this too. Then of course we get to other devices such as the Vigor, which had different levels and modification attachments that you could buy. And then there's the Pulsar, which came armed with a curved arm to get those hard to reach locations. I'm laughing because it's so obvious and in your face, but they still had to hide it. If a woman was brave enough and could hide things, of course, she would often buy the tourist massage apparatus, that's the name, on a Polish holiday from the more liberal women in Poland stocks or marketed them as a personal device. Look, this one even includes an instruction on how to massage your neck. She must be in so much pain, she can't even keep her shirt on, she's in so much pain. What a horrible pain to be in. These days, these personal devices are, I kid you not, collectibles, and you can actually buy them on eBay. I don't think you should, but you can. Again though, these are a bit obvious and a bit overt. What happens if you can't be overt? Well, introducing Comrade Lizard. Yeah, that's right, the Soviet Union had special lines of toys that became very popular amongst young women and men of a certain persuasion, if you catch my drift. The Lizard here is a great example, but there were so many more. But yeah, that's the history of Soviet special devices. Look, it's an interesting topic, and I think it's very, very funny in the sense that how much it is indicative of the Soviet Union, of that can't tell the truthness sort of thing that takes over the Union. That, for example, if you have a goal with your job that you have to do, you write the goal and rewrite the answer to show you've completed the goal, because you can't fail. Because if you fail, the guy below you and the guy above you fail, so the guy below you blames you, and then you lose your job. So it's very much indicative of that late Soviet rod, but on a much more personal and intimate level. Now please everyone be an adult in the comment section while I try somehow to get this video monetized and not shot by the YouTube KGB for talking about non-state sanctioned personal apparati. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll catch you next time, you absolutely mental people. Can I have more PG things in my list of things to do for 5 Minute History, please?